Hey everybody, welcome to our weekly discussion of the for small groups, and we're talking about my press pause that I got to preach in front of the entire church. It's really good to always get that opportunity to speak to everybody at the same time. It's a little bit unusual, isn't it, that everybody is so spread out, 12 different services, 4 different campuses. I guess it's kind of cool. Do you like it when we all get to share with everybody?
It's awesome because, typically we get to hear the flavor of each co-pastor telling their side of the story, but it's awesome just to see one central message going out across all our campuses, and it's one of the things I look forward to the most.
Well, I actually try to put together a different persona on each campus. And
there you go. So everybody thinks you're something different.
But then on that day, they get the real thing. No, seriously. Let's talk a little bit about Jesus including what everyone else may exclude. You ever felt marginalized in your life? Has there ever been a season of your life where you felt like you were kind of on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I'll tell you, growing up in 6A high school and having what people would think is an athletic build with zero athletic talent, just definitely put me on the outskirts. I feel like I was constantly getting some kind of criticism. So just my whole life I wanted to be that, and it just was not in the cards. No way.
Yeah. I see this pretty often where people feel like they're kind of on the outside, and I've thought of, a lot of different groups, and maybe you could even share that in your groups. What is it that you feel like, or a time in which you feel like you've been kind of excluded, or maybe when you've seen someone else that's excluded. And so some of the groups that we find that feel kind of marginalized in our society, maybe let's talk about that for just a second. Of course, we don't want to have a culture of entitlement, but at the same time, we should at least recognize people that oftentimes feel marginalized. Can you think of some of those groups? I know you work with some.
Yeah, just with teenagers themselves, there's this idea that they know less, they have little experience, they don't have a lot to add, they're consumers, they're not givers. And I think I work with a ton of students who just often feel like they can't contribute because the expectation is they just don't have a lot to give. And then I think for my own personal life, David, that growing up, I grew up in a household that was mixed religion. So my father was a Muslim, and then my mother was a Christian, and their relationship, I think, put them kind of on the outskirts of being accepted at a church or being at a mosque, and it was one of those things that we always lived a little bit on the fringe, and there's all sorts of unique circumstances. I think of people that are divorced. I think of people that are in the midst of sin.
I might even argue that somebody that feels like they've been through maybe serial divorces. Of course, I just can only imagine that makes you feel very marginalized. Or single people? You think a lot of times people that are single feel that way? I think
absolutely. Whenever you find yourself just kind of on the outside looking in, wanting something, and it being a public affair, I think it's really easy to put that on yourself.
So as we talked about in the message, though, it can be very easy to begin to believe that something will fill that need. That if you get this, if your kid gets on this select team, or if you get this job, or you get into this college, or whatever it is, that you begin to think that there's something that if you achieve this, receive this, acquire this, that you will feel fulfilled. Why do you think people fall into that trap?
It's interesting. I talk to our teens about this a lot, and I tell them, an inside problem isn't fixed with an outside solution.
Wow, that's good.
It's the sort of thing that's...
and we talked about that a little bit, that this guy thought it was an external thing that he needed changing, but it was actually internal.
That's right. And so a lot of times, whether it's your car engine, or it's your TV remote, if it's your garden, none of these things grow better with neglect. And if there's something on the inside that's broken, a TV remote that needs batteries, a car that needs an oil change, if the inside is not taken care of, there's no outside solution that's going to fix it.
So I talked about on Sunday when I was traveling and doing some youth camps, particularly when I had the opportunity to live in Australia. I had this little board that I made, and it was a picture of a human, and it was fairly tall, and I would walk around, and I had a hole in the heart. And of course, this is really simplistic. I mean, this was the best theology I had when I was, when I was 21 years old. But I would go in there, and I would take a Barbie doll, or I would take an automobile, or a phone, or at that time probably a jam
Just
box.
try to fit it.
Yeah, and I would try to fit it in that hole,
Yeah.
and then talk about, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11, that God has set eternity in the hearts of men.
Right.
And so anything else that you try to put is like, trying to put a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
And maybe a good discussion point would be for each of you there at home to talk about some of the things that in the course of your life that you believe that if you receive this kind of external solution, that you would have internal peace.
Yeah.
And did it work, or did it not? That might be a good thing to talk about.
That's good. Yeah.
So we also then talked a little bit about Jesus actually reversing the curse. Ask about exclusion. You ever felt like you've been cursed in your life? I mean, do you ever feel like that you've got this curse that just has followed you around, maybe generationally, or that maybe you're even scared about passing on to your children?
Yeah, I come from 7 generations of alcoholics. That has been the thing that I've heard my whole life, and I've always just had this fear inside of me that I was a ticking time bomb, that I was waiting to become my father. And my dad didn't stick around after him and my mom got together and they had me. He didn't stick around, and so again, I grew up thinking I'm just a few steps away from becoming my father if I ever messed my marriage up. And so, in some ways I've thought to myself, am I walking around with this hidden thing that nobody knows of, this curse?
Yeah.
And so I wonder, even for myself, I bet there's some of you that probably feel just the same way, that there's something inside of you that just feels like a curse or something broken that you're just wary of anybody finding out about.
Do you find it interesting that the New Testament church, after Jesus comes, includes what others exclude, reverses the curse, that the church is built basically on the backs of women,
Isn't it
children,
interesting? Yeah.
and former slaves?
Yeah, isn't that incredible?
I mean, kind of the most marginalized in society.
Yeah, it's true. The people that you would think that God is the worst talent scout ever, right?
Yes, you would.
You would
if
think,
that's what you were trying to do, right? If that's
yeah.
your objective, was to recruit the best.
Right. But he just has such plans for those of us that are broken and messed up. I love what Genesis 50:20 says when it speaks of the life of Joseph, that what the world meant for evil, God has meant for good. And I've seen this work itself out in so many different ways in people's lives where they were just shattered in some kind of way, or they had some kind of addiction or problem, and God used that to make something incredible happen for the kingdom.
Yeah, and I think that once again, another opportunity for each group would be to kind of discuss some of the places where you've seen God do that very thing in your life. And so we'll give you a break. You can take a break right now if you want to. You can pause it even if you want to. And we're back. So we're glad that you have the chance to discuss some of those things. Now, when you think about that, and Jesus then building the church on the backs of those people that are marginalized, does that go against maybe conventional wisdom? Even in youth ministry, I know that sometimes, I'm just going to be honest here, I don't want to necessarily, you don't have to say this because you're the current student minister, but sometimes I find myself getting really excited when one of the really popular kids started coming, because to me, my motives weren't wrong. It wasn't because I wanted to be around popular kids, it's because I thought that they could attract other kids. But to be honest, sometimes I felt that, and kind of thinking back, that's a little bit dirty and maybe even a little bit contrary to what the scripture teaches.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly easy sometimes because that is a little bit of an easier mission field. It's true. I think all of us are all about missions until they come and sit right next to our kids on a Wednesday night,
yeah,
right?
Sure, of course.
And you've got somebody that you would think to yourself, why are they coming to church? They are real messed up. They've got a lot of problems. But when you get the 30,000-foot view here and think to yourself, this is who the church belongs for, right?
Yeah, right. Why it was made. Yeah, and I know that this isn't true of me, but I know for Randy and Paul, sometimes they like to see, the full family come on a Sunday morning. They're like special prospects. I'm just kidding. They don't really think that. But once again, if we look in the flesh, we oftentimes can miss. We have to see with our spiritual eyes. Maybe that's what Jesus was communicating in Sunday to the blind man. When he says the Pharisees, they're the ones that are blind. Right. These Jews that claim to be able to see are the ones that are blind. But now there's a blind man who has been in the margins, now is able to see. It's awesome to see what God does. And I'm going to use this term, and I know that it's inflammatory, but I want to use it this way intentionally. It's amazing to see what God does with junk.
It's so true. And I think this would probably be a great time for you guys if you're sitting around discussing right now. This would be a great time to talk a little bit about the things in your life that looked like you were so ashamed of, things that you thought to yourself, man, I don't want to tell anybody about this, and just the way that ministry has come forth from those sorts of things. We tell our teenagers a lot, I love this phrase, that dogs don't bark at parked cars, right? So when you're going places in life, if you've ever seen a dog chasing a car, when you go places, people are going to chirp, people are going to say things, but when you're sitting still and you're not going anywhere, you're not any kind of threat or any kind of danger. And so I think this would be a great time for you guys to discuss just what it is that God has used in your life from your past that maybe was a little messy.
Yeah, and note that even when you're discussing those things and thinking about those things, that we have an enemy that wants to bring condemnation anytime God is bringing freedom.
Every time.
And anytime God is bringing about liberation, anytime you're coming to the realization that, yeah, I felt kind of in the margins. I felt like damaged goods, like I shared a little bit on Sunday. I felt kind of out there. God takes that, He redeems that, and not because He, and this sounds so strange, it's not because He needs, righteousness or He needs sin. He just needs people.
Right.
And when we receive what He has for us, He can do amazing things.
Yeah, I love that. And the story of the paralytic who Jesus calls him to pick up his mat and walk. What a story of redemption there.
That was the second idea, that lame man, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible, and I think it's great to note that he doesn't call him just to walk, but He calls him to pick up the very thing that made him comfortable to lay there. If I was
and both of them required. I mean, both the blind man and the lame man have to do something, right? You have to wash in the pool. You have to pick up your mat, right? There's always a response, that faith response that's required in order to really be able to fully actualize what faith has for us.
Yeah, I love that. Like, Jesus has brought them 99.99999% of the way. And He just leaves this 1% right here that's like, I just want you to trust me on this. Pick up your mat, or go to the pool, or put the phone down, or quit dating the boy, or whatever it is. He wants to deliver us, but a lot of times there's some buy-in on our end.
You have to receive it and then respond. I mean, the whole idea of worship is revelation and then response. So anyway, well, hey, listen, we thank you for being a part of our discussion today. We hope that you have a great time with your group. I would encourage you to go back and look at in John chapter 5, but really I think the end of John chapter 8, John chapter 9, that we were looking at with the man who washed in the pool of Siloam. Go back and read about that encounter that he has with the Pharisees after he's actually healed. Go back and look at that. I would encourage you to take some time. I hope that you have a wonderful time with your group. God bless you, and we are glad that you're meeting regularly. Talk to you next week.
See you next time.